welcome to Inspirational Journeys of the Best Minds, where we share stories of individuals shaping the world around us. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by a visionary leader whose inspiration resonates beyond the boardroom. Lee-Han Tjioe, the general manager of IBM Consulting Hong Kong. He embodies the essence of transformative leadership, driving collaboration and organizational success. His leadership style is a blend of empathy, decisiveness, and forward-thinking innovation. His ability to lead successful teams while maintaining focus on individual growth is a source of inspiration. Thank you so much for joining us, Lee-Han.
Thank you, Victoria. Nice to be here.
Very glad to have you here. So, Lee-Han, when you were a kid, what did you want to become?
Well, frankly, actually, I was not very ambitious at that time, professionally speaking. So I had other interests. I was actually much more in sports. And actually, the interest came a little bit later. So when I started studying, I saw a general interest in business. So I went to University for Business Economics as a study and thought, well, that gives me a lot of broad options later on to discover what I really want to do. And I guess the challenge I had at the time was that from the study books itself, I didn't really find a real passion, whether would it be marketing, finance, I thought all interesting topics, but it didn't really give me the kind of passion at that time. So I decided to do and which was a turning point, I decided to do an internship at a strategy consulting firm in the Netherlands. And that actually was a tremendous experience because initially my objective was to see what the advisory firm was doing in multiple functions, HR, finance, organization, marketing. And thought, well, at least then I can firsthand experience what it is like. At the end of the assignment, actually, I did conclude that the actual job of consulting really attracted me. It was really exciting. The partners I worked with, they were really great. They challenged me to go beyond the assignment, do some additional analysis, surprise the clients. And I was still a student already making impact in the clients they had. So yeah, tremendous experience. And then at that time I thought, yeah, probably that's my journey to become a consultant.
Excellent. Would you say that was a turning point in your career journey?
Yes, definitely kickstarted. There have been many, but that clearly helped me really to get focus where to go.
What are some other turning points that you've experienced in your career journey?
So there were very few. So one of the things that when I started actually my consulting career, initially as a young consultant, one of the challenges I faced was that I did a lot of advisory projects. I did strategy advice, but I also saw that some of the advice really led to implementation was done by the organization itself, or sometimes they brought in another firm to do the implementation. Or worse, the PowerPoint presentation stayed in the desk of the executives that I was advising. So it's a typical kind of challenge for consulting to really demonstrate the value, and I experienced that firsthand. For me, a turning point was as I worked at an insurance company, also in the Netherlands in this case, which asked me to advise them on a new distribution channel, a new innovative concept that they wanted to implement in the Netherlands. And I and a small team did the strategy advice. We did the market analysis. We even did the business case to convince their board. And I helped the client actually to go through the whole cycle of decision making internally. And I think that created a bit of a bond between me and the client. And then when the board said, well, it's okay, we are going to go forward. Then they asked me personally and said, well, why, Lee-Han, do you help us to do the real implementation? Which was quite a kind of new step for me, because then I had to change from being just an advisor as really being an implementation partner, or even I felt myself a bit as an entrepreneur, because when we actually formed a team, we worked together with the client. We had a separate organization, separate floor, so they created a kind of incumbency initiative. So we were all fully 100% focused only on launching this new online insurance platform in the Netherlands. And we were very successful. So after 3 months, we already introduced the first products. After 2 years, they were market leading in their market segment. And I could really see that the financial results were there. So then I saw, okay, now I have the full journey from being an advisor to really achieving real outcomes with our clients. And that for me was a big turning point because later on, I focused much more also on the implementation, which I thought is actually really where the fun really starts, when you see the real results happening.
And what are some challenges that you've faced in your career journey?
Well, so challenges I would say is to really get still to a next phase, because one of the challenges that as a consultant you work in an environment, you have your clients, you are successful, but before you know it, you're operating in a kind of comfort zone. And I always felt to create value for clients, to bring in new ideas, you really have to also challenge yourself to learn something new, to have new experiences. Otherwise, there's always a risk that you are going to repeat what you have already done, and that will level out your impact and maybe even your personal growth. So one of the changes I pushed for myself and also the organization I worked for was to get an assignment, and that actually was in Hong Kong. That was my first assignment. Talk about 20 years ago now, so I feel already old, but that was 20 years ago. I was already here in Hong Kong, and I worked for a year and a half in multiple companies, insurance companies, banks. And the great thing about that timing was that many of the multinational firms used Asia and also Hong Kong a bit as an area where they did innovations. And they tried new things out, maybe not in their home markets, but they did it here in Asia. And a lot of the projects I did was about e-commerce. You could call it digital now, that we did. And that was fascinating. So I really lived that dream. So I worked in the Philippines, I worked in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong. So as a young consultant, that was actually to me the dream coming true. But it also helped me. So when I, after 1 and a half, came back to the Netherlands, to bring that story to my clients. And I felt I really bring something new. And I felt it actually very easy. They were very interested to learn and hear about my personal stories here in Asia, about its innovations and how we could adapt that to their market environment. So yeah, the challenge is that you have to be really careful, that you are not learning, not progressing. And the solution hereby was really the globalization in my case, learning about best practices and use those best practices to bring even more value to your clients in your own market.
Definitely. It's so important to keep on innovating and growing personally to avoid stagnating in our ever evolving global landscape.
Exactly, fully agree.
Exactly. How do you find that your personal history has helped shape your professional history?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, there's indeed a bit of a personal drive that started with me being a kid of a mixed couple. So my father has Chinese background, Chinese heritage. My mother was Dutch. And that put me in a situation that I was different than many of the people in my environment. So I was in a local town in the Netherlands. And one example was that my passion initially was to play soccer, football in the Netherlands. And I remember that in those days when I arrived with my team in another town to play an away game, that people were actually talking, hey, there's a Chinese in that team. And I thought, oh, I found it really frustrating. It's almost like you are labeled based because of your appearance. And especially as a young kid, that's a bit intimidating. And maybe that was also the purpose of those comments. So I had a choice. I could say, okay, let's find another more receptive environment where I will pursue my hobbies, my interests. Or, and that was actually the way I took it, I think, no, this actually motivates me even more to really excel and basically to see those, to show the people that were labeling me that actually I'm a really great football player. And of course, it sounds a bit childish, but in a way, it helped me to create my personal brand as a kid. And actually, I was really fanatical about this. So when I came out of school, almost every day, I was playing football. I did a lot of training. I was fortunate; my legs were growing. I actually had pretty long legs as a kid, so I became at some point almost always the fastest kid on the soccer pitch. So I could outrun them, score many goals, and that gave me a lot of personal satisfaction. So in the year when I was visiting again the town, they would say, "Hey, there's the team with the Chinese again, but watch him; he's very good."
Fabulous. It seems that you developed an amazing resilience throughout your experience in soccer growing up. And has that resilience translated in your work?
I think so. So one of the things that I learned is that if you want to be really successful, you have to be focused on outcomes, and that's of course in the sports game, scoring goals, winning games, winning championships. That's something where you really, really get a lot of pride and passion out of. And I think that element I also found back in my work. I like the fact that in the consulting business, you're also challenged always for results. So there's always a lot of pressure in that sense to be successful with your clients. So the fact that you deliver a successful project to clients, that gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. Building successful teams is also part of the job, which also gives me that lot of satisfaction. But I also know from experience it doesn't come lightly. You have to make sacrifices to get there. And the sacrifices, in a way that I made during my career, is that I push myself that almost every 3 years, sometimes maximum 5 years, I push myself in another job. So I didn't mean I changed employer that much, but I really pushed myself to get other opportunities in other markets, in other functions, in other roles. So to stay away from this idea of being comfortable in your position and try to last that as long as possible, I knew I had to change, had to stay in the game and to stay relevant.
Definitely need to stay on the cutting edge, need to always be learning.
Exactly. And that's true at every phase of your career for everybody, especially in this world where there's so much happening. There's so many innovations, technology, we see that happening. Generative AI, which is currently like a hot topic. I'm also today learning every day about this, and I know I need to do because that's what our clients, our market is asking for.
Of course, you're a very passionate individual. How do you help your teams become passionate and develop the drive that you have to create the success that you need?
Well, I like to be part of the team. So I don't like to be somebody that's outside of the team and giving instructions and then say, okay, come back to me once the job is done. So I like the idea of being a playing captain, which means that in every kind of role, how senior you are, still in our profession, being part as a consultant in the consulting team means that you also add value to the clients and working together. I think that's a part of it. So taking responsibility, taking ownership. But also take time to do coaching and mentoring on the job. Because part of my reason also being back here in Hong Kong is to take the experiences from other markets in consulting, the experience from strategy to implementation, also to the teams, to help them to actually even accelerate, based on my learnings, their personal journey. And I get the greatest satisfaction. I said, I like outcomes, I like results. But the number one result is that somebody is making a promotion, and based on some of the support that I've been able to provide.
Oh, that's fantastic. And could you provide an example of someone that you've helped mentor and promote throughout their career journey?
Well, of course, there are many examples, but I think there are a few people that I worked with together that actually were able to actually go to full cycle of promotion. And in my career, and in consulting, becoming a partner is really like a key moment in someone's career. And that's always not that easy, because becoming a partner in a consulting firm means that you are successful as a consultant, but that you also can develop new business, that you can deliver successful projects. And I had actually, maybe not calling out one person, but a few individuals I worked very closely with on the client engagements together. And I also help them as a coach and mentor, which is also normally a formal role in a consulting firm, to really go to all the cycles. Because becoming a partner also involves that you have to be successful in presenting your business case to a panel of partners that are going to evaluate. We are also going to ask clients about the impact. So I've been coaching multiple individuals through that process, even being part of that partner panel in many cases, in many firms, to really help people to just make that last step and to really then raise the flag of reaching the partnership level in our firms.
Brilliant. So you've succeeded in so many endeavors. What are some challenges that you've had to face? Any obstacles that you've had to overcome?
Well, one real big challenge comes back a little bit to my early stage of life. My mother died in a car accident at a relatively young age. I also was a very young adult at that time. And one of the things that actually, through the process, I learned that you cannot take anything for granted. I think at that time, I was still a young, relatively irresponsible individual and not career focused, taking the day as it comes, enjoying life. But then I realized, actually, your life can change in a split second. All your certainties can disappear. which is also true in today's reality. Think about it. We have all these pandemic phases. We have trade wars. There are wars. There are personal tragedies, like in my case, that can happen. So my key takeaway was that always think about what's next. Build your plan for your future. Be prepared if something happens that will take you out of your maybe comfort, forces you to take a decision that you are actually prepared for it. So I think that was for me a very important learning and lesson, which I'm still applying based on a kind of previous tragic situation, of course.
Well, thank you for sharing that. What is the most important life lesson you've learned?
Well, I think it comes a bit back to the don't take anything for granted. I think the next thing, and that's maybe more a lesson from my dad, is that you have to take sacrifices. So my dad, at the age of 17, migrated from Indonesia to the Netherlands, and we talk about decades ago. In that environment, immigrants were quite new, especially in a country like the Netherlands. So the personal journey that he had to go through, I realized a little bit later, is that that's tough, because you come in a maybe not so receptive environment. He had to start his study. He had to leave his family in Indonesia. At that time, you couldn't really WhatsApp or WeChat and have all these interactions. So there was a big kind of separation from your social and family environment. But he took it as his passion, because he wanted to succeed as an economist, and he turned out to be very successful. But the sacrifices that he had to make were quite significant. And again, talking about career, about how you want to progress, sacrifices are part of it. And so you asked a question about resilience. Resilience doesn't mean that when you like a job, you continue to do the job. Anybody can do it. Resilience means that once you face challenges, or where there are some issues or some major setbacks that anybody will be confronted with at any time, that you then pursue, that you just continue to really, despite some of the pushback that you may receive or the difficulties that you go through, that you maintain on your path. So I think that's probably also another lesson in life that I still try to apply as well and reflect back. But that sometimes even in very privileged situations, we may think, no, everything will be fine anyway. I don't have to change. But even now, think about those immigrants that are coming here in Asia, that have to work for the whole year on a construction project, and their families are in other provinces at the same time. Those sacrifices are still made. So people in a professional situation should also learn from that.
Excellent. So last question. Do you have any advice to aspiring young professionals beginning their corporate careers?
Yeah, maybe a bit in line with the things that we discussed today, and thanks for the conversation. I really enjoyed this. I think it's really about this diversity of experiences, because it's very hard for anybody at a young age to already say, oh, this is what I want to do. I think in reality, there are so many options. So try to experiment early on with many different experiences. Push yourself, even maybe during your study. Take on different job roles or go to a consulting firm and get this diversity of experiences. So don't get too fixed on one outcome early on, because you don't know. You don't know. So you have to really discover your passion. But secondly, I would say in that process, try to find your niche. Try to find the area where you can really excel and where you can be different, where indeed your passion will be. Because there are so many talents here. There's so many people that are well educated. That's not a differentiator anymore. That's something that's just an enabler for you. Mm-hmm. So really try to get that view and work to it. So for me, it was initially globalization, being international, then became consulting, and then I focused a bit more on the insurance industry, working with new distribution channels. So that's a bit my niche right now. But I think even if you are young, try to already define that path for you so that you have a bit of a plan to work through. And the final recommendation would be challenge yourself. And I think that's true for any professional. If you are in the job for a number of years and you are very comfortable, you should maybe rethink if you're on the right track. Rethink what you want to do, where you can go next, so that you keep learning and keep developing yourself.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lee-Han.
Thanks, Victoria. Very nice meeting you.
Very nice meeting you too.